Can you imagine the weight of a secret carried in a child's trembling hands? 8-year-old Elijah Marshall stood before the judge, clutching a worn photograph that shook with the intensity of his grip, as if it held the very heartbeat of his past. 7 foster homes in 8 years had schooled him in silence, teaching him to bury memories so deep they might never resurface, yet he couldn't erase the echo of a lullaby, the rhythm of a heartbeat, or the face in that precious picture he'd guarded like a treasure. Judge Rebecca Williams, at 42, was a fortress of resolve, renowned for tackling family court's most heart-wrenching cases without so much as a flinch. But who could have guessed the hidden wound behind her steely gaze? A falsified death certificate and an empty nursery had forged her into the law's fiercest protector, a mother who'd lost everything, or so she thought. For 15 years, Rebecca had draped her pain in the heavy robes of justice, burying her grief beneath a mantle of duty. But today? Oh, today was different. A silent boy with eyes that mirrored her own stepped into her courtroom, and with 4 earth-shattering words, "You're my mom now." He tore through the walls she'd built around her heart. Can you feel the gasp that rippled through the courtroom? A single mother's cry for justice was about to ignite a firestorm, exposing decades of elite corruption, unraveling a nationwide conspiracy of stolen babies, and toppling a criminal empire that had perfected the brutal art of infant trafficking. Because behind every forged death certificate lies a mother who never stopped searching, and behind every stolen child, a truth screams to be uncovered. The morning sun streamed through the towering windows of courtroom 307, casting long dramatic shadows across the polished wooden floors. Judge Rebecca Williams sat behind her imposing bench, her sharp blue eyes scanning the documents before her with a precision that could cut glass. Known as one of the most respected judges in family court, she was a beacon of hope for children trapped in broken homes. Her colleagues marveled at her surgical approach, never once suspecting the personal agony that fueled her relentless dedication. But today, something was off. Why did her chest tighten as she reviewed the file of Elijah Marshall, an 8-year-old boy whose foster parents, James and Patricia Turner, wanted to wash their hands of him after just 4 months? Her fingers traced the edges of the thick manila folder, each page a testament to a life too heavy for such a young soul. The courtroom was eerily quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Rebecca lifted her gaze, and there he was, Elijah, a small figure in the front row, sitting so still he might have been a statue. His shoulders hunched forward, his eyes glued to the floor, and a navy blue sweater, a size too big, swallowed his slight frame, making him seem even more fragile. Unlike other kids his age, who'd fidget or glance around with curiosity, Elijah was motionless, as if willing himself to vanish. What was it about him that tugged at her heart? "Dear Honor," Patricia Turner's voice sliced through the silence, dripping with rehearsed concern. "We've done everything we could, but Elijah is," she paused, searching for the right words, "simply too difficult to handle." Rebecca's jaw clenched, a subtle flicker of anger betraying her composure. 15 years on the bench had taught her every excuse for abandoning a child, and this one stung. "Please elaborate, Mrs. Turner," she said, her voice steady but sharp. Patricia smoothed her designer skirt, her manicured nails glinting under the courtroom lights. A diamond tennis bracelet sparkled on her wrist as she gestured dismissively. "He refuses to speak most days. He won't join family activities. When we try to include him, he just stares at us with those vacant eyes." James Turner nodded, his expensive suit rustling as he shifted in his chair. "We have other foster children thriving in our home, but Elijah," he shook his head, adjusting his gold cufflinks with a flourish. "He's had outbursts that deeply concern us." "Outbursts? What kind?" Rebecca pressed, her eyes catching the way Elijah's shoulders tensed at the word. His small hands tightened around something, a photograph maybe? She couldn't quite tell, but it was clearly his lifeline. "He screams in his sleep," Patricia replied, her tone cold and clinical. "Last week, we found him hiding in his closet at 3 a.m., crying and clutching some old photograph. When we tried to help, he went hysterical, kicking, screaming when James tried to pick him up." Rebecca's gaze snapped back to Elijah. There it was, a worn, creased photograph clutched so tightly his knuckles whitened. Her heart skipped. Why did it feel so significant? Leaning forward, she softened her voice, as if speaking to a frightened bird. "Elijah, would you like to tell me how you're feeling about all this?" Silence. His fingers only gripped the photo tighter. Sarah Martinez, the social worker beside him, touched his shoulder gently, her kind face etched with the exhaustion of too many cases. "Elijah hasn't spoken in weeks, Your Honor," she said. The trauma specialist thinks it's from his past placements. Past placements. Rebecca's stomach churned as she flipped through the file, counting them, 7 homes in 8 years. Each transfer blamed behavioral issues or failure to attach, with no mention of his biological parents beyond a vague note. Circumstances of entry into foster care unclear, records incomplete. The morning light shifted, casting Elijah's face in shadow, and Rebecca found herself studying him more closely than usual. Was it the hollow look in his eyes? Or the way the Turners spoke of him like a faulty gadget they wanted to return? Something about this case pierced her carefully guarded professional distance. She'd seen hundreds of cases like this, but this one felt personal. Why? "Mrs. Turner," she said, a slight edge creeping into her voice, "you mention Elijah's refusal to bond. Have you considered his withdrawal might be a cry for help, not defiance?" Patricia's lips tightened, a flash of annoyance breaking through her polished facade before she masked it with concern. "With all due respect, Your Honor, we're experienced foster parents. We know the difference between a child who needs help and one who just won't accept it." James cleared his throat, straightening his tie with a smug air. "We've given Elijah everything: private school, therapy, a brand new room with top-notch furniture. We even hired a tutor to catch him up in school. But he shows no appreciation, no desire to be part of our family." Rebecca's anger surged. How could they reduce a child to a checklist of material goods? She was about to fire back when something stopped her cold. Elijah had lifted his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers for the first time. The intensity of his gaze hit her like a thunderbolt. Those eyes, why were they so hauntingly familiar? Her heart raced, a strange mix of déjà vu and unease washing over her. She'd seen countless children in her courtroom, so why did this boy's face stir something deep in her memory? Rebecca shook off the feeling, clinging to her professional resolve. The Turners' lawyer, William Bradford, stepped forward, his tailored suit and confident swagger screaming of courtroom victories. "Your Honor, my clients have provided extensive documentation of Elijah's issues: night terrors, selective mutism, emotional outbursts. He's simply not a fit for their household." Rebecca's fingers drummed lightly on her desk. "Mr. Bradford, your client's committed to providing a stable home for a child with significant trauma. These behaviors are typical responses to such experiences, are they not?" "Nevertheless," Bradford replied smoothly, "the Turners have other foster children to consider. Elijah's presence disrupts their household's harmony. Surely you see their position." A headache pulsed behind Rebecca's eyes. She glanced at Sarah Martinez. "Ms. Martinez, what alternative placements are available for Elijah?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Given his history, Your Honor, finding a new placement immediately will be tough. He'd likely need to return to the group home temporarily while we search for a foster family." Rebecca saw Elijah's hands tremble at group home. The photograph crinkled in his grip, its faded edge catching her eye. Something about it, the paper's texture, the way it had aged, nagged at her, but she couldn't pin it down. "I see," she said, trying to focus on the legalities, but her eyes kept drifting to Elijah. His presence tugged at her like a half-remembered dream, his features, the curve of his cheek, the set of his jaw, drawing her in with an intensity that startled her. The morning dragged on as Bradford piled on evidence: school reports of Elijah's slipping grades, therapist notes on his resistance to bonding, a pediatrician's letter flagging his emotional state. Through it all, Elijah sat frozen, the photograph his only tether to the world. Rebecca noticed the little things others might miss: his scuffed shoes, hinting at the Turners' limited generosity, the way he flinched when voices rose, as if bracing for trouble, the faint tremor in his hands when James Turner moved suddenly. "Your Honor," Bradford's voice cut through her thoughts, "we request immediate approval of the placement termination." Rebecca straightened, forcing her focus back to the case. "Before I decide, I want to speak with Elijah privately in my chambers." "Your Honor," Patricia interjected, her tone sharp, "he won't speak." "We've told you, nevertheless," Rebecca snapped, her voice firm, "I want to try." She gathered her papers, ready to call a recess. When it happened, oh how it happened. Elijah stood, his sudden movement so startling that Sarah grabbed his arm reflexively. The photograph fluttered to the floor, but he didn't notice, his eyes fixed on Rebecca with a fierce, unshakable resolve. "You're my mom." His small voice rang out, clear and piercing, slicing through the courtroom's hush. The words hung in the air, crystalline and unshakable, sending shockwaves through everyone present. Rebecca's blood ran cold, her face draining of color as murmurs erupted around her. The Turners exchanged panicked glances, and Sarah tried to guide Elijah back to his seat, but he stood firm, his gaze never wavering. "You're my mom," he repeated, louder, more certain. "I knew it the moment I saw you." Rebecca gripped the bench, her knuckles white, the room spinning as memories she'd buried for 8 years clawed their way to the surface. A hospital room, devastating news, a loss that had defined her life. Could it be? The photograph lay face down on the floor, its secrets still hidden. Patricia's voice cut through the chaos, shrill and accusing. "Your Honor, this proves his instability. He's delusional. Court is in recess." Rebecca managed, her voice trembling. She rose, her robe swirling like armor. "We'll reconvene in 1 hour." She fled to her chambers, Elijah's gaze burning into her back, his words echoing in her mind like a relentless drumbeat. Closing the door, she leaned against it, her composure shattering. Because in that moment when Elijah's eyes met hers, she'd felt it too, a connection so profound it defied explanation, a pull she couldn't ignore. Alone now, Judge Rebecca Williams faced the most daunting case of her career, one that threatened to unravel her past, her present, and her very future. Through the door, she heard the courtroom's chaos settle, Sarah's soothing voice calming Elijah, the Turners' heated whispers to their lawyer, the bailiff's footsteps clearing the room. But all she could hear was her pounding heart and the image of Elijah's eyes that held accusation, hope, fear, and an undeniable recognition. On unsteady legs, she sank into her chair, her hand reaching for the bottom drawer where she kept a small box of mementos, a hospital bracelet, a tiny knit cap, a death certificate, the remnants of the son she'd lost 8 years ago. Was it possible? The timing aligned, but there was a death certificate. She'd grieved, rebuilt her life on that loss. Yet Elijah's words had struck a chord deep within her, stirring doubts she hadn't known existed. Closing her eyes, she tried to steady her breathing, but her mind replayed Elijah's gaze, not desperate but certain, as if he'd known her forever. That photograph, still on the courtroom floor, what truth did it hold? What secrets hid in the incomplete records of his early life? The clock ticked, counting down to when she'd face Elijah again, confronting the possibility that her world was about to shatter. Outside, the sun climbed higher, oblivious to the drama below. But in courtroom 307, a small boy's words had ignited a chain of events that would unearth buried secrets, expose corruption, and maybe, just maybe, reunite a mother with a child she thought was gone forever. Oh, can you feel the electricity in the air when a single moment changes everything? Elijah Marshall, just 8 years old, shot to his feet in courtroom 307, his sudden movement so startling that Sarah Martinez instinctively grabbed his arm. The worn photograph he'd been clutching slipped from his trembling hands, fluttering to the floor like a leaf caught in a storm, but Elijah didn't even glance at it. His wide, soulful eyes were locked on Judge Rebecca Williams, brimming with an emotion so raw it defied naming. When he spoke, his small voice cut through the hushed courtroom like a bell, clear and unwavering. "You're my mom." Those words hung in the air, sparkling like shards of crystal, their clarity and conviction sending shockwaves through every heart in the room. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face, her world tilting as the courtroom erupted in stunned murmurs. The Turners, James and Patricia, exchanged panicked glances, their polished facades cracking, while Sarah tried to gently guide Elijah back to his seat. But Elijah? He stood like a rock, his gaze never wavering from Rebecca's face. "You're my mom," he declared again, his voice stronger, fiercer. "I knew it the second I saw you." Rebecca's hands gripped the edge of her bench, knuckles whitening as if she could anchor herself against the storm raging within. The room spun, memories buried for 8 long years clawing their way to the surface, flashes of a sterile hospital room, the crushing weight of devastating news, a loss that had carved out her heart and shaped her life ever since. That photograph, lying face down on the courtroom floor, held secrets she couldn't yet fathom. Patricia Turner's voice sliced through the chaos, sharp and accusing. "Your Honor, this clearly shows his instability. He's delusional." But Rebecca could barely hear her. "Court is in recess," she managed, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. She rose, gathering her judicial robes around her like a suit of armor, her heart pounding. "We'll reconvene in 1 hour." As she fled to her chambers, Elijah's gaze burned into her back, his words echoing in her mind like a relentless heartbeat. She shut the door and leaned against it, her professional composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. Because, oh, in that fleeting moment when Elijah's eyes met hers, she'd felt it too, a connection so profound it defied logic, a pull so strong it threatened to unravel her very soul. Alone now, Judge Rebecca Williams faced the most daunting case of her career, one that could rewrite her past, append her present, and reshape her future in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Through the door, the courtroom's commotion slowly settled. Sarah's gentle voice soothing Elijah, the Turners' sharp whispers to their lawyer, the bailiff's footsteps clearing the room. But all Rebecca could hear was the thunder of her own heart and the haunting image of Elijah's eyes that seemed to hold a storm of accusation, hope, fear, and an unshakable recognition. On unsteady legs, she stumbled to her desk, sinking into her chair as if the weight of the world pressed down on her. Her hand, almost of its own accord, reached for the bottom drawer, where a small wooden box held the fragments of a life lost, a delicate hospital bracelet, a tiny knit cap never worn, and a death certificate, the only remnants of the son she'd grieved for 8 years. How could this be? The timing matched perfectly, but there was a death certificate. She'd seen it, signed it, built her life around the jagged edges of that loss. Yet Elijah's words had struck a chord deep within her, awakening doubts she hadn't known she carried. Closing her eyes, she tried to steady her racing breath, but her mind replayed that moment, Elijah's gaze, not desperate or pleading, but fierce with certainty, as if he'd known her forever. What did he see in her that sparked such conviction? That photograph, still lying on the courtroom floor, what secrets did it hold? What truths were buried in the incomplete records of Elijah's early life? The clock on her wall ticked relentlessly, each second a countdown to when she'd have to return, to face Elijah again and confront the possibility that her carefully ordered world was about to shatter into a million pieces. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, indifferent to the drama unfolding below, but in courtroom 307, a small boy's words had ignited a chain reaction, one that would unearth long-buried secrets, expose a web of corruption, and maybe, just maybe, reunite a mother with a child she'd thought was lost forever. Rebecca's hands trembled as she bent to retrieve the fallen photograph from the courtroom floor. The bailiff had cleared the room, leaving her alone with this tangible piece of Elijah's claim. She turned it over slowly, her breath catching in her throat like a sob. There, in faded colors, was a younger version of herself, seated in a hospital garden, her hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly, her face glowing with the anticipation of motherhood. Oh, how vividly she remembered that day, the last moment of joy before her world crumbled. The pain of that memory hit her like a tidal wave, nearly buckling her knees.
Your Honor. Sarah Martinez's voice came softly from the doorway. Are you okay?
Rebecca straightened, clutching the photograph as if it might vanish.
Come in, Ms. Martinez.
Where's Elijah? He's in the children's waiting room with a court assistant, Sarah replied, closing the door behind her. Judge Williams, I've never seen him speak like that. In all his placements, he's never claimed to recognize anyone as family. It's extraordinary. Rebecca sank into her chair, placing the photograph on her desk with reverence. Tell me everything you know about his background, she said, her voice taut with urgency. Sarah opened her thick case file, her fingers flipping through pages. Elijah entered the system as an infant. The records from that time are spotty at best, no birth certificate, just documentation from the foster agency that first placed him. Which agency? Rebecca's tone was sharp, almost desperate. New Beginnings Family Services, Sarah answered, scanning more papers. They shut down 5 years ago after some financial irregularities, shady stuff if you ask me. Rebecca's mind raced back 8 years to Riverside Memorial Hospital, the prestigious private facility where she'd given birth. They'd told her son was stillborn, rushed her into signing papers while she was still groggy from medication.
The memory stung like a fresh wound.
Ms. Martinez, I need to tell you something, she said, her professional facade cracking like thin ice. 8 years ago, I was pregnant. It was a tough pregnancy, with complications toward the end. They did an emergency C-section, and afterward, her voice broke, the pain still raw. They told me my son didn't survive. I never even got to see him.
Sarah's eyes widened, the connection dawning like a sunrise.
The timing matches, she whispered. Exactly. Rebecca stood, pacing behind her desk, her mind a whirlwind. But there was a death certificate. I saw it, signed it. How could this be possible?
She froze, a memory surfacing like a ghost.
There was a nurse. She kept insisting I shouldn't see the body, said it would be too traumatic. Why would she say that? The clocks ticking filled the silence, each tick a hammer against Rebecca's heart. Her thoughts spiraled through possibilities she'd never dared consider. I need you to do something for me, she said finally, her voice resolute. Find out everything you can about New Beginnings Family Services, every detail, their leadership, their connections, their funding sources. Leave no stone unturned. Of course, Sarah nodded, then hesitated.
What about Elia?
The Turners won't take him back, and the group home, no. Rebecca's voice was fierce. He's not going back to that group home. Find him an emergency placement for tonight. Tomorrow, I'm hiring a private investigator. After Sarah left, Rebecca sank back into her chair, memories flooding her like a river breaking its banks. She saw herself 8 years younger, walking into Riverside Memorial with her husband, James, their hearts brimming with hope. James had died 2 years later in a car accident, never knowing their son might still be alive. The pregnancy had been a battle. Severe morning sickness landed her in the hospital twice, but she'd pushed through, decorating a nursery with soft blues, choosing the name Benjamin after her grandfather. Then, at 36 weeks, the complications struck like lightning. Closing her eyes, Rebecca relived the chaos, the rush of medical staff, urgent voices, the sharp stab of fear. She'd woken hours later to a nurse with pitying eyes, delivering the news that her baby hadn't survived. The days that followed were a blur of grief and medication, a fog she'd barely emerged from. The jarring ring of her office phone snapped her back to the present, her clerk, reminding her of afternoon appointments. Cancel everything, she ordered, her voice shaking. It's a family emergency. The next hour was a frenzy of action. She called Marcus Chun, the sharpest private investigator she knew. Marcus, I need hospital records from Riverside Memorial, 8 years ago. Focus on the maternity ward, especially stillbirth cases. And dig into New Beginnings Family Services, every detail you can find. Then she dialed Laura Thompson, her old friend and now chief of pediatrics at City General. Laura, I need a favor, a DNA test, rush basis, completely confidential.
Becca, what is happening?
Laura's voice was thick with concern. I can't explain yet, Rebecca's voice caught, but I think my son might be alive. The afternoon blurred into a whirlwind of activity. Rebecca arranged for Sarah to bring Elijah to a private meeting room, away from the courtroom's formal wait. When he walked in, his eyes found hers instantly, that same piercing recognition making her heart race. Hello, Elijah, she said, her voice gentle as a lullaby. Would you like to sit down? He moved cautiously to a chair, still clutching what she now saw was another photograph, its edges worn from years of handling.
Mais ici what you holding?
Slowly, Elijah extended his hand, offering the older, more tattered photo. It showed Rebecca leaving the hospital, her face etched with grief, her eyes hollow. On the back in faded ink were the words, "Your real mom, don't forget." Rebecca's hand trembled as she held it. Where did you get this? She asked softly. Miss Jenny gave it to me, Elijah whispered, his voice barely audible, at my third foster home. She said she worked at the hospital where I was born. She said they lied to you. Rebecca's heart stuttered as she placed both photographs side by side, their truths intertwining. Elijah, I need to ask something important. Do you remember Miss Jenny's last name? He shook his head, his eyes downcast. She left after giving me the picture. The other foster parents said she got fired. A knock at the door broke the moment. Sarah entered with Dr. Michael Watson, a court-appointed child psychologist. Judge Williams, we need to discuss Elijah's temporary placement, Sarah said. Rebecca looked at the boy who might be her son, seeing fear creep back into his eyes at the word placement. Making a decision that would surely raise eyebrows, she declared, he'll stay with me tonight. Your Honor, Dr. Watson began, given the circumstances, I'm not speaking as a judge right now. Rebecca's voice was unyielding. I'm speaking as someone who needs answers. Ms. Martinez can stay with us to keep things proper. As afternoon faded into evening, Rebecca's home buzzed with more life than it had in years. Sarah helped Elijah settle into the guest room, his small bag of belongings a stark reminder of his transient life. In her study, Rebecca met with Marcus Chin. The hospital's records from that period are a mess, he reported, his brow furrowed. Files altered, some missing entirely. But I found something, New Beginnings Family Services was paying a nurse named Jennifer Kirkland regularly.
Rebecca S. Briscogt.
Can you find her? I'm on it, Marcus assured her. She left the state 5 years ago, around the time New Beginnings collapsed, but people always leave trails. After Marcus left, Rebecca stood in the guest room doorway, watching Elijah sleep. His face was peaceful for the first time, one hand still clutching the photograph under his pillow.
Sarah's voice came softly behind her.
I've never seen him so calm. First nights in new places are usually rough for him. Rebecca turned, her heart heavy. Sarah, am I crazy for believing this could be true? Sarah's eyes were kind but serious. In 15 years of social work, I've seen corruption in the system, agencies, hospitals, falsified records. It's not as rare as you'd think. Later, alone in her study, Rebecca opened the bottom drawer, pulling out the box of baby mementos she'd never had the heart to discard, the tiny hat unworn, the hospital bracelet, the death certificate that now felt like a lie. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found something. Hospital security footage from that night was supposedly erased, but I've got a contact who might recover it. Call you tomorrow. Hope and fear warred within her. If Elijah was her son, how had this happened? Who was responsible? The night deepened, but sleep was a distant dream, her heart too full of questions, her mind too alive with possibilities.
Oh, quand you imagine the qui est magique of a moment that change everything.
As Marcus Chun slipped out into the night, Rebecca Williams found herself standing in the doorway of her guest room, her heart swelling as she watched Elijah sleep. For the first time since their paths crossed in that courtroom, his small face was peaceful, free from the shadows of fear, one hand still clutching the precious photograph under his pillow like a lifeline to his past.
Sarah Martinez's soft voice broke the silence behind her.
I've never seen him so calm. Usually, his first night in a new place is a battle against nightmares. Rebecca turned, her eyes searching Sarah's face. Be honest with me, Sarah, am I losing my mind to think this could be real? Sarah's gaze was steady, her words measured but heavy with truth. In my 15 years of social work, I've seen the system's dark underbelly, private adoption agencies colluding with hospitals, falsified documents, desperate parents paying fortunes for a child. It's not as rare as you'd hope, Rebecca. Corruption festers where hope is exploited. Later that night, after Sarah had settled into the spare guest room, Rebecca retreated to her study, the weight of the day pressing on her like a storm cloud. Alone in the dim glow of her desk lamp, she opened the bottom drawer, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the small wooden box she'd never had the heart to discard. Inside lay the relics of a life she'd lost, a tiny knit cap never worn, a hospital bracelet that had once circled her wrist, and a death certificate that now screamed of deceit. Each item was a dagger to her heart, a reminder of the son she'd grieved for 8 years. Her phone buzzed, jarring her from her thoughts. A text from Marcus. Found something big. Hospital security footage from that night was supposedly erased, but I've got a contact who might recover it. Call you tomorrow. Her pulse quickened. Could this be the key to unraveling the truth? Leaning back in her chair, Rebecca felt emotions warring within her like a tempest. Hope clashed with fear, possibility wrestled with the cold practicality of her judicial mind. If Elijah was truly her son, what then? How had such a monstrous theft happened? Who could be so cruel as to tear a newborn from his mother's arms? A soft sound snapped her back to the present. There in the doorway, stood Elijah in borrowed pajamas, his cheeks streaked with tears. I had a bad dream, he whispered, his voice so small it could break your heart. Without a moment's hesitation, Rebecca opened her arms, and he moved toward her, slowly at first, then all at once, collapsing against her, his face buried in her shoulder as if she were his safe harbor. As she held him, something profound clicked into place, a recognition that transcended logic or evidence, as if her soul had always known his. It's okay, sweetheart, she murmured, stroking his hair gently. You're safe now, safe with me. They stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, wrapped in a silence that spoke louder than words. Almost instinctively, Rebecca began humming an old lullaby, one her mother had sung to her under starry skies long ago. To her astonishment, Elijah's small voice joined in, humming along as if the melody lived in his bones. How do you know this song? She asked, her voice soft with wonder. I remember it, he said, his words muffled against her shoulder, from before when you used to sing to me. Rebecca's heart stuttered. Could it be true? Before? She pressed, her voice trembling. When I was in your tummy, Elijah replied, his voice carrying a quiet certainty. The nice nurse, Miss Jenny, told me you sang it all the time. She said they took me away from you, but that one day I'd find you again. Tears streamed down Rebecca's cheeks as she pulled him closer, her heart breaking and mending all at once. Outside, the city had fallen silent, its usual hum muted, but inside her mind, pieces of a shattered puzzle were snapping into place. Tomorrow would bring investigations, DNA tests, and a barrage of difficult questions, but tonight? Oh, tonight she held her son, and with a certainty that defied explanation, she knew he was hers. Tell me about Miss Jenny, Rebecca urged gently, her voice a soothing balm. Tell me everything you remember. As Elijah began to speak, his voice grew stronger, each word a thread in the tapestry of their lost years. Rebecca reached for a notepad, her judicial instincts kicking in. Every detail could be crucial in unraveling the conspiracy that had stolen him from her 8 years ago. But more than that, she hungered to know every moment of the life she'd missed, every joy and sorrow her son had endured. The night deepened around them, wrapping mother and son in a cocoon of rediscovery as they began the sacred journey of finding their way back to each other. In her study, surrounded by towering law books and cherished family photos, Rebecca felt the iron walls she'd built around her heart crumble like sandcastles before the tide. Tomorrow would bring formidable challenges. The Turners would scramble to salvage their reputation, the hospital would deny every accusation, old records would need to be pried open, witnesses tracked down, and truth clawed from a web of lies. But for now, Rebecca held her son, listening to his breathing slow as he drifted back to sleep in her arms, and knew with unshakable clarity that every step of her life had led to this miraculous moment. On her desk, the two photographs lay side by side, one a painful echo of what was lost, the other a beacon of what might be reclaimed. Between them stretched the truth of a story just beginning to unfold, a saga of loss, corruption, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. As the first rays of dawn crept through her study windows, painting the room in soft gold, Rebecca made a silent vow: she would uncover the truth no matter the cost. She would hold accountable every soul who had played a part in stealing her son, and above all, she would ensure Elijah never felt unloved or unwanted again. The road ahead would be fraught with obstacles, but as she gazed at the sleeping child in her arms, Rebecca knew it would be worth every battle. Because sometimes, in the face of life's cruelest injustices, miracles still bloom. And sometimes, those miracles take the form of a small boy with familiar eyes, carrying a worn photograph and 8 years of lost memories, ready to rewrite a story of love that refused to be silenced. Morning light filtered through the unfamiliar curtains of Rebecca's guest room, and for a fleeting moment, panic gripped Elijah as he woke. Another new place, another strange bed. But then, from somewhere in the house, came the soft strains of that familiar lullaby, and his racing heart steadied. He wasn't alone anymore. Downstairs, Rebecca stood in her kitchen, preparing breakfast with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, her mind a whirlwind of hope and fear. The DNA test results were days away, but in her heart, she already knew the truth. The way Elijah hummed that lullaby, the precise way he scrunched his nose when concentrating, exactly like her father used to do, were signs she couldn't ignore. Oh, how she'd missed 8 years of these tiny precious discoveries. Sarah Martinez arrived early, her arms laden with a thick file, her face alight with urgency. I was up all night digging through Elijah's records, she said, accepting a cup of coffee with a grateful nod. You need to see this. They spread the documents across Rebecca's dining room table, a chaotic map of a stolen childhood, while Elijah ate breakfast in the kitchen, his small frame hunched over a plate of pancakes. The earliest records were heartbreakingly sparse, just a single form claiming he'd been surrendered to New Beginnings Family Services by an unnamed mother, with no birth certificate or medical history to anchor his existence. His first placement was with the Hendersons, Sarah explained, pulling out a weathered report. They kept him for 14 months before sending him back, claiming he cried too much and wouldn't sleep through the night. Rebecca's jaw tightened, anger flaring in her chest. He was a baby. That's what babies do. Sarah's voice held barely contained fury. The Hendersons were serial fosters, taking in infants, pocketing support payments, then dumping them when the work got hard. Elijah was just 13 months old when they gave him up. The next placement was with Michael and Karen Davis, who kept him for 8 months until a neighbor reported suspicious bruises. The investigation was inconclusive, but Elijah was removed for his safety, a small mercy in a system that had failed him time and again. Rebecca's hands clenched into fists as she read the police report. They said he fell down the stairs? He was barely walking. The system let him down, Sarah said softly, her voice heavy with regret, over and over again. A small sound made them both turn. Elijah stood in the doorway, his empty breakfast plate clutched tightly, his eyes fixed on the scattered papers with a mix of recognition and fear. "Those are my bad family papers," he whispered, his voice trembling like a leaf. Rebecca quickly gathered the documents, her heart aching, but Elijah shook his head. "I remember them, the mean ones who locked me in the dark." "Come here, sweetheart," Rebecca said, opening her arms wide. After a moment's hesitation, Elijah ran to her, burying himself in her embrace. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," she soothed, but something inside Elijah had broken open, like a dam giving way. His words came haltingly at first, then in a rush, each one a dagger to Rebecca's heart. The Davis house had a big, cold basement, and when he cried, they'd lock him down there, telling him monsters would get him if he made a sound. Rebecca held him tighter, meeting Sarah's horrified gaze over his head. This was the most Elijah had spoken in months, but oh, how his words shattered their hearts. "After them came Miss Jenny's house," Elijah continued, his voice softening. "She was nice, she read me stories, never yelled. But then she went away." Sarah flipped through her files, her brow furrowed. Jennifer Kirkland was his foster parent for just under 6 months. She was terminated abruptly, no reason given. "Because she told me about you," Elijah said, looking up at Rebecca with those soulful eyes. "She showed me your picture and said they took me away from you. The next day, different people came and took me to a new house." Rebecca stroked his hair, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. "Can you tell us about the other houses, sweetheart?" Elijah's body tensed, but he pressed on, his courage a beacon in the dim morning light. "The Wilsons had too many kids, forcing them to fight for scraps of food. If you weren't fast, you went hungry. Their file revealed they'd fostered 17 children over 3 years before losing their license for unsafe conditions, but the damage to Elijah's young soul was already done. Then came the Roberts, and Elijah's voice shrank to a whisper. Mr. Roberts liked to play games." Rebecca's stomach churned as she read between the lines of the Roberts file. Thomas Roberts was now in prison for crimes against minors, but not before leaving a trail of traumatized children in his wake. "The nice lady at the office said I had to be brave and tell the truth," Elijah whispered, "so I did. But then everyone was mad at me." "You did exactly the right thing," Rebecca said fiercely, her voice brimming with protective love. "You were so brave." Sarah pulled out more recent files, her hands steady despite the weight of their contents. After the Roberts nightmare, Elijah spent 6 months in a group home before being placed with the Martins. "They had a dog," Elijah offered, a flicker of warmth in his voice, "but they said I scared it by screaming in my sleep, so they sent me away too." The Turners were his 7th placement in 8 years, each rejection carving deeper scars into his young heart. Rebecca seethed at Patricia Turner's complaints, Elijah's silence, his withdrawal, his failure to bond. How dare they blame him for shielding himself the only way he knew how? A sharp knock at the door made Elijah jump, his small body tensing against Rebecca. Sarah went to answer, returning with Marcus Chun, who carried a laptop and a stack of folders, his face alight with purpose. "I found Jennifer Kirkland," he announced, cutting straight to the chase. "She's living under a new name in Oregon, and she's ready to talk." Rebecca's heart leaped, but she kept her voice calm for Elijah's sake. "What did she say?" "She wants to meet in person," Marcus replied, his eyes flicking to Elijah. "She's got documentation, papers, photos, even recordings from her time at the hospital. She says she's been waiting for this day for 8 years. Sarah spoke up, her tone practical yet gentle. "I can take Elijah to his therapy appointment while you, no." Elijah's grip on Rebecca tightened, his voice desperate.
Don't leave me. I won't, sweetheart, Rebecca promised, her voice avouched in stone. Never again.
She turned to Marcus. "Can she come here?" "She's already on her way," he said with a nod.
Should be here tomorrow morning.
The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity, the house buzzing with a sense of purpose. Dr. Michael Watson, the court-appointed psychologist, arrived to evaluate Elijah in Rebecca's warm, welcoming home. To everyone's amazement, Elijah spoke more than he had in months, though he clung to Rebecca's side, refusing to let her out of his sight. "He's showing clear attachment behaviors," Dr. Watson noted, his voice tinged with awe. It's rare in children with his trauma history. There's something truly remarkable about his connection to you, Judge Williams. Late that afternoon, the preliminary DNA test results arrived, delivered by a courier with a sealed envelope that felt heavier than it should. Rebecca's hands trembled as she tore it open, her heart pounding like a drum. But before she could read the results, Elijah's small voice cut through the tension. "I already know you're my mom," he said simply, his eyes shining with unshakable faith.
I rememberat. Mayat.
Rebecca asked, her voice catching. "It's sound when you sang to me before I was born," he explained, his words a melody of memory. "I never forgot it, even when I didn't know what I was remembering." The test results confirmed what their souls already knew. Elijah was her son. Rebecca sank into a chair, the paper slipping from her fingers as tears welled in her eyes. Sarah caught it, reading quickly, her voice breaking with emotion. "It's a match," she confirmed, tears streaming down her face. 99.9% probability of maternity. In that moment, the world seemed to pause, the weight of 8 lost years lifting just enough to let hope shine through, a miracle born from a small boy's courage and a mother's undying love. Oh, can you feel the weight of a mother's heart beating with newfound purpose? That evening, as Sarah Martinez slipped out into the cool night and Elijah slumbered peacefully upstairs, Rebecca Williams sat in her study, the room bathed in the warm glow of a single lamp, plotting her next moves with Marcus Chun. The air crackled with urgency as Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Jennifer Kirkland's testimony is going to be our linchpin," he declared. "But we need more, way more. The hospital will fight tooth and nail to bury this. They can't afford a scandal this explosive." Rebecca's mind raced, her judicial instincts sharpening. "And new beginnings," she pressed, her voice taut with dread. "Just how deep does this rabbit hole go?" Marcus's eyes darkened as he opened his laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. "Deep, unimaginably deep. I've uncovered financial records showing payments from the agency to hospital administrators, nurses, even a handful of doctors. This wasn't just about Elijah, Rebecca. They were running a cold, calculated operation, a machine designed to steal children." Rebecca's heart sank, her thoughts spiraling to all the other mothers out there, hearts shattered by lies, told their babies had died, their children funneled into a corrupt system like pawns in a cruel game. Her judicial mind kicked into overdrive, cataloging charges in a mental ledger: fraud, kidnapping, conspiracy. Oh, the list grew with every heartbeat. "We're going to need protection," she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm within. "When this story breaks, powerful people will do anything to bury it." Marcus nodded, a glint of resolve in his eyes. "Already on it. I've got friends in the FBI who are itching to dig into this case. They know it's big." A soft sound from the doorway snapped their attention away from the laptop's glow. There stood Elijah, his small figure dwarfed by borrowed pajamas, tears glistening on his cheeks like tiny stars. "I had another bad dream," he whispered, his voice trembling with fear. Rebecca's heart broke open, and she opened her arms wide.
Come here, sweetheart.
Elijah ran to her, and she enveloped him in a fierce embrace, mouthing later to Marcus over his head. Marcus nodded silently, packing up his files with quiet efficiency before slipping out, leaving mother and son alone in the stillness of the study. Rebecca settled into the big armchair, Elijah nestled against her, his small body warm and fragile. "Want to tell me about your dream?" she asked softly, her voice a soothing balm. His words were muffled against her shoulder, each one a dagger to her heart. "They were trying to take me away again, the mean people." Rebecca's arms tightened, her voice fierce with a mother's unyielding love. "That will never happen, Elijah. I'm your mom, and I'm a judge. That gives me special powers to keep you safe forever." Elijah lifted his head, his eyes wide with curiosity.
Like a super-héros.
Rebecca's heart warmed, a smile breaking through her worry at this glimpse of the child beneath the trauma. "Exactly like a superhero. And you know what? You've got powers too." "I do?" he asked, his voice tinged with wonder. "Oh yes," she said, her eyes shining. "You were brave enough to keep searching for me, even when everyone told you to forget. You kept that picture safe all these years, never giving up hope. Those are the most incredible powers of all."
They sat together in the key study, the moon casting silvery shadow through the windows, painting the room in a dreamlike glow.
Rebecca hummed their lullaby, the same one that had tethered Elijah to her across years of separation, and she felt him relax against her, his small body softening. "Tomorrow," she said gently, "someone special is coming to visit, someone who knew you when you were just a tiny baby." Elijah's eyes widened, sparkling with hope.
Miss Jenny?
"Really? Really?" Rebecca confirmed, her heart lifting at his excitement. "She's going to help us make sure no one can ever take you away again. But for now, you need to rest." His voice quivered, fear creeping back.
Will you stay with me? Just until he fall asleep.
Rebecca's heart swelled as she carried him back to his room, tucking him into bed with a tenderness she'd longed to give for 8 lost years. She sat beside him, stroking his hair, humming their lullaby until his breathing slowed, deep and even, a sign of trust she cherished. Looking down at her son's peaceful face, Rebecca felt a fierce determination take root, a fire that would not be quenched. Tomorrow would bring Jennifer Kirkland and her trove of evidence, the first steps in a battle to expose the truth and bring justice to those who'd torn their family apart. But tonight, in this sacred quiet moment, Rebecca simply watched her son sleep, her heart overflowing with gratitude for the miracle that had brought him back to her. The years of pain had etched their marks on both of them, scars that told stories of loss and survival, but together, they could begin to heal, stitch by stitch. Outside, the city slept, oblivious to the storm brewing within its bounds, a story of corruption and stolen children poised to erupt. But in Rebecca's home, mother and son had found each other again, guided by a love that refused to fade, a memory that held fast, and a lullaby that had never been forgotten. Early the next morning, Jennifer Kirkland arrived at Rebecca's doorstep, her silver hair neatly pinned but her hands trembling as she clutched a worn leather briefcase, its contents a ticking time bomb of truth. She froze when she saw Elijah peeking from behind Rebecca's legs, her breath catching in a soft gasp. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You found each other." Elijah's eyes lit up with recognition, his small voice clear and bright. "Miss Jenny." Jenny knelt down, tears spilling down her cheeks like a river breaking free. "Look at you, sweet boy, how big you've grown."
"You always knew you'd find your mama someday."
Rebecca ushered them into the living room, where Marcus Chen and Sarah Martinez waited, the air heavy with anticipation. Jenny settled on the couch, Elijah choosing to stay close to Rebecca, his eyes fixed on his former foster mother with a mix of awe and curiosity. "I've been waiting 8 long years for this moment." Jenny began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands as she opened her briefcase. "I've been gathering evidence, making copies, keeping it all safe, knowing one day someone would start asking the right questions." She pulled out a thick folder, its edges worn from years of careful handling. It started small. "I was a labor and delivery nurse at Riverside Memorial. Sometimes we get orders to tell mothers their babies hadn't survived, even though they were alive and well. The hospital claimed we were helping place unwanted babies with loving families, but it never sat right with me." Rebecca's hand found Elijah's shoulder, grounding them both as the weight of Jenny's words settled over them. "But I wanted my baby," she said, her voice tight with pain. "I had a nursery ready, painted blue, with a crib waiting." Jenny nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "That's when I saw the darkness behind it all. They weren't just placing unwanted babies, they were stealing wanted ones, the right kind, ones they could sell to wealthy families desperate for a private adoption." Marcus leaned forward, his voice sharp with interest. "How many cases are we talking about?" "At least 30 that I documented between 2015 and 2018, Jenny replied, pulling out a USB drive that held the keys to their fight. "I kept everything, dates, names, payments. I even recorded conversations with administrators when they thought no one was listening." Sarah scribbled notes furiously while Marcus plugged the drive into his laptop, his eyes scanning the files with growing intensity. Rebecca listened, horror rising like bile as Jenny laid bare the operation's chilling details. Dr. Thomas Wells was the mastermind. Jenny explained, her voice steady but laced with disgust. He worked with New Beginnings to find clients, rich couples willing to pay 6 figures for a baby. They'd scout for the perfect targets, mothers with the right racial background, health history, and social situation. "How did they choose?" Rebecca asked, her voice tight, each word a struggle. "They targeted women like you," Jenny said softly, "professional, educated, healthy, but vulnerable, single mothers, women who'd lost partners, women without strong family support, easy to isolate and manipulate." Rebecca's heart clenched, memories flooding back of her loneliness after James's death early in her pregnancy. Jenny pressed on, her words relentless. When a suitable baby was born, they'd stage a crisis, claim the baby was in distress, rush the mother into emergency surgery. While she was under anesthesia, they'd whisk the baby away, then tell her it was stillborn. But there are protocols. Sarah interjected, her voice rising in disbelief. Death certificates they had people everywhere. Jenny cut in, her tone fierce. Medical examiners signing off without checking bodies, administrators backdating paperwork. New Beginnings handled the rest, forging new birth certificates, placing babies with paying clients, making it all look legal. Marcus let out a low whistle, his eyes glued to his screen. The money trail is staggering, payments from $200,000 to $500,000 per baby. Elijah, who'd been listening in quiet awe, suddenly spoke, his small voice piercing the room's tension. Is that why they took me? Because someone paid money. Rebecca pulled him into her lap, her heart breaking at the confusion in his eyes. Jenny leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. No, sweet boy, they took you because bad people wanted to profit. But you were always loved, your mama wanted you more than anything. Then why did I keep getting sent away? His question landed like a blow, silencing the room.
Géniès face d'Arkened.
Because the people who bought babies weren't always good parents. When things got tough, they'd give up. New Beginnings would place the children in foster care, collecting monthly payments for each one, a second profit stream. Marcus added grimly, they cashed in twice on every child. Rebecca's thoughts turned to the Turners, their designer clothes and sparkling diamond bracelets a stark contrast to their cold dismissal of Elijah. Were my son's first parents part of this? She asked, her voice trembling with rage. Jenny nodded, her expression somber. The Richardsons, they paid $350,000 for him. But when he developed colic, they decided he was a mistake and returned him like a faulty product. Rebecca's arms tightened around Elijah, her heart aching for the pain he'd endured. That's when he entered the foster system? Yes, Jenny confirmed. I was a part-time foster parent, trying to protect as many kids as I could. When Elijah came to me, I recognized him instantly. I was there the day he was born, saw them take him away. I had to tell him the truth, give him that photograph of you. And they found out, Rebecca guessed, her voice sharp with realization. Someone must have overheard me talking to him about his real mother, Jenny said, her tone bitter. The next day, they terminated my foster care license and blacklisted me from every hospital in the state. Marcus looked up from his laptop, his voice grim. They tried to ruin you. I'm finding complaints against you, claims of mental instability, classic smear tactics. Jenny's smile was wry, undaunted. They couldn't stop me. I'd been collecting evidence for years, every stolen baby, every fake death certificate, every dirty payment.
Ive gotitol.
Sarah, poring over the files, gasped softly, her eyes wide. There are other judges on this list, people who fast-tracked adoptions without scrutiny. The corruption runs deep, Jenny confirmed, her voice heavy with the weight of truth. That's why I waited for the right moment, the right person to trust with this. Rebecca stood, moving to her desk where her legal pad waited, her years of judicial experience surging to the forefront. She began listing charges with precision. Kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, human trafficking, falsifying medical records, perjury. The net was widening. Don't forget RICO, Marcus added, his tone sharp. This was an organized crime ring, crossing state lines. Elijah's wide eyes took it all in, his small voice breaking through the tension. Are the bad people going to jail? Oh yes, sweetheart. Rebecca assured him, her voice fierce with conviction. They're going to jail for a very, very long time. Jenny reached into her briefcase one last time, her hands steady now. There's one more thing you need to see. She pulled out an old yellowed envelope, its edges soft with age. I took these the day Elijah was born, before they could take him away. Rebecca opened it with trembling hands, her breath catching as she saw the photographs inside. Tiny Elijah, red-faced and squalling, mere moments after birth, so alive, so perfect. You took these, she whispered, her voice breaking. I knew his real mother would want to see them one day, Jenny said, wiping away tears. He was perfect, 8 pounds, 3 ounces, with strong lungs and a healthy appetite. Everything they told you about complications? All lies. Rebecca stared at the photos, her finger tracing her son's newborn face, tears falling freely now. Elijah pressed close, peering at the images of himself as a baby. Was I crying? He asked, his voice soft with wonder. You were announcing your arrival to the world. Jenny smiled, her eyes warm. Just like your mama, strong, determined, unstoppable. Marcus cleared his throat, pulling them back to the present. We need to tread carefully from here. Once we file charges, they'll try to destroy evidence, silence witnesses. I've got copies of everything in 3 secure locations, Jenny assured him, her voice resolute. And I'm not alone. Other nurses, other workers knew what was happening but were too scared to speak. Once this breaks, they'll come forward, I'm sure of it. The room pulsed with the promise of justice, the weight of their mission settling over them like a mantle. Rebecca held Elijah close, her heart a fortress of love and resolve, ready to fight for the truth that would set not just her son free, but countless others trapped in the shadows of a corrupt system. Can you imagine the fire in a mother's heart when she discovers her child was stolen? Sarah Martinez leapt to her feet, her arms overflowing with files, her voice brimming with resolve. I'm diving into every single adoption and foster placement New Beginnings ever touched. There could be dozens, maybe hundreds, of stolen children out there, waiting to be found. Marcus Chen's eyes gleamed with determination as he chimed in, I'm reaching out to my FBI contacts right now. We need federal muscle to track down every player in this sick game and freeze their assets before they can run. Rebecca nodded, her judicial mind already mapping out a battle plan, even as she cradled Elijah close, his small warmth anchoring her to the present. We'll need to coordinate with other jurisdictions, set up a task force. These cases are going to be a beast, multiple charges, multiple defendants, years of evidence to sift through. We're in for a fight. A small voice cut through the intensity, soft but piercing. What about me? Elijah asked, his eyes wide with worry. Do I have to go back to the Turners? Rebecca's heart clenched, and she pulled him tighter, her voice fierce with a mother's unyielding love. Never, sweetheart. You're staying right here with me, where you belong forever. Jenny Kirkland reached out, her weathered hand squeezing Elijah's gently, her eyes misty with pride. You did it, sweet boy. You found your way home, just like I always knew you would. The rest of the day swirled by in a whirlwind of activity, the house buzzing with purpose. Marcus dashed off to meet his FBI contacts, his phone already glued to his ear, while Sarah began the meticulous process of transferring Elijah's custody to Rebecca, her fingers flying through paperwork with a determination that matched her heart. Jenny lingered, her presence a comforting anchor, sharing tender stories of Elijah's time with her, his first wobbly steps, his love for bedtime stories, filling in the gaps of a history stolen from them. That evening, after Jenny had retreated to her hotel and Sarah had returned to her office, Rebecca sat with Elijah on the living room couch, the baby photos spread out before them like a bridge across lost years. Oh, how I wish I could have been there, she said softly, her voice thick with longing. To hold you, to sing to you, to watch you grow into this brave boy. Elijah's eyes met hers, wise beyond his years. You can now, Mommy, he said simply. Miss Jenny says that's what matters most. Rebecca kissed the top of his head, breathing in the sweet scent of her son, her heart swelling with a love she'd thought was lost forever. She's so right, and we have so much time to make up for. Later, after Elijah was tucked into bed, Rebecca retreated to her study, the weight of Jenny's files heavy in her hands. The scope of the corruption was staggering. Doctors, nurses, administrators, social workers, even judges, all woven into a sinister web, conspiring to rip babies from their mother's arms and sell them to the highest bidders. Her phone buzzed, a sharp jolt in the quiet, a text from Marcus, FBI task force approved. Arrests start tomorrow morning. Keep Elijah close, the media's gonna swarm. Her pulse quickened. Could this really be happening? Rebecca's gaze fell to the latest photo of Elijah on her desk, snapped just that afternoon. He was beaming, a genuine smile lighting up his eyes as Jenny recounted tales of his toddler antics. Next to it sat the newborn photo, a stark reminder of all that had been stolen from them. But against impossible odds, they'd found each other. Now it was time to ensure justice, not just for them, but for every family torn apart by greed and lies. A soft knock at the study door pulled her from her thoughts. Elijah stood there in his pajamas, his ever-present photograph clutched tightly, its edges worn from years of devotion. "Another bad dream?" Rebecca asked gently, her heart aching for him. He shook his head, his voice small but steady. "No. I just needed to make sure you were still here. Come here, sweetheart." She opened her arms, and he climbed into her lap, fitting perfectly against her. "I'm not going anywhere, ever. I promise." She held him close, humming their lullaby, its familiar notes a thread connecting their past to their future. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day," she said softly. "There'll be people asking questions, taking pictures, wanting to talk to us. But we'll face it all together, okay?" Elijah nodded against her shoulder, his voice sleepy but certain. "Like superheroes?" Rebecca's heart warmed, a smile breaking through her worry. "Exactly like superheroes. And you know what? You're the bravest superhero I've ever met. You never stopped believing, never stopped searching for me." "Miss Jenny helped," he murmured, his eyelids drooping. "She told me to keep your picture safe, to never forget." "We'll never forget her," Rebecca vowed, her voice thick with gratitude. "She brought us back together." As Elijah drifted off in her arms, Rebecca's thoughts turned to the days ahead. There would be arrests, investigations, trials, a grueling fight against the wealthy and powerful who'd stop at nothing to protect their secrets and stolen children. But she was no longer just Rebecca Williams, the respected family court judge. She was a mother who'd reclaimed her stolen son, and she'd move heaven and earth to protect him and every other family shattered by this corrupt system. The night deepened around them, the quiet hum of the house wrapping them in a cocoon of safety. Rebecca held her sleeping child, their matching heartbeats a poignant reminder of all they'd lost and found again. Tomorrow would bring chaos, challenges, and a spotlight they couldn't escape, but tonight? Oh, tonight they were together, secure in the knowledge that their long, painful separation was finally over. Outside her study window, the stars blazed in the dark sky, silent witnesses to a mother and child reunited against all odds, ready to face whatever lay ahead with unyielding courage. The morning news erupted like a volcano, headlines screaming across every channel: FBI raids Riverside Memorial Hospital. Major child trafficking ring uncovered. Judge reunites with stolen son. Rebecca sat in her living room, Elijah curled against her side, his small hand clutching hers as images of doctors and administrators being led away in handcuffs flashed across the screen. "That's Dr. Wells," Elijah whispered, pointing at a gray-haired man shielding his face from the cameras. "He was so mean to Miss Jenny." Rebecca's heart ached for the fear he must have felt, but she stroked his hair gently, grounding him in her love. Marcus Chun lounged in the armchair across from them, his phone a lifeline to the FBI agents he was coordinating with. "They've nabbed 15 people already," he reported, his voice a mix of triumph and urgency. 5 doctors, 3 hospital administrators. Dr. Wells is spilling everything, trying to cut a deal. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "What's he saying?" "Everything," Marcus exclaimed. "Names, dates, bank accounts. The operation was even bigger than we imagined. They had ties to private adoption agencies in 6 states. Sarah burst through the front door, her arms laden with files, her face alight with discovery. "You've got to see this," she panted, dropping the stack on the coffee table. "We found 12 more cases of stolen babies at Riverside Memorial alone, all following the same twisted pattern." Rebecca's judicial mind snapped into gear, her voice steady despite the rising tide of anger. "We need a dedicated task force now. These families will need counseling, legal aid, everything we can give them to rebuild their lives." A sharp knock at the door interrupted her, and FBI agent Lisa Taylor stood there, her badge gleaming like a beacon of justice. "Judge Williams, we need to talk about the Turners," she said, her tone grave. Elijah tensed against Rebecca's side, his small body trembling. She pulled him closer, her voice fierce. "What about them?" Agent Taylor sat down, opening her laptop with a grim expression. "James and Patricia Turner? They're not real. Their true names are Robert and Mary Sullivan, and they've been working with these adoption rings for years, posing as professional foster parents." Sarah flipped through her files frantically, her voice rising in disbelief. "But their credentials, their home studies, how could this be? All fake." Agent Taylor said, her jaw tight. "They were paid to take in kids from shady adoptions, covering the paper trail. When families started asking questions or kids remembered too much, they'd cry behavioral issues and shuffle them deeper into the system. Rebecca felt sick, her stomach churning. How many children? 27 over the past decade. Agent Taylor's face hardened. Some were stolen babies whose adoptive families bailed. Others were legit foster kids used as camouflage. They're in custody now. Elijah's voice, small but steady, broke the stunned silence. They knew I remembered things, he said, clutching his photograph tighter. That's why they locked my door at night. All eyes turned to him, Rebecca's heart clenching with pain. What things, sweetheart? She asked, her voice soft but urgent. The hospital, being carried down dark hallways, he said, his eyes distant. Your voice, singing to me before I was born. They got mad when I talked about it. Agent Taylor leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. Elijah, would you be willing to tell us more about the Turners?
Anything you remember could save other kids.
Rebecca felt him tremble, her heart aching for his bravery. You don't have to do it now, she assured him, and I'll be right here when you're ready. Marcus's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his voice sharp with news. The FBI just arrested Judge Harris, he announced. He was rubber-stamping suspicious adoptions, fast-tracking paperwork for new beginnings. Rebecca's head snapped up, shock coursing through her.
Frank Harris?
He's been on the family court bench for 20 years. And raking in millions on the side. Marcus showed them his screen, offshore accounts, Cayman Island properties, wire transfers from shell companies. Sarah stood abruptly, her voice trembling with fury. I need to review every case he touched. How many children did he help traffic? How many families did he destroy? The day spiraled into a whirlwind of revelations, each one a gut punch. More arrests rolled in, more victims were identified, and Rebecca's phone rang incessantly with calls from judges, court administrators, and reporters hungry for a scoop. She ignored them all, her focus locked on Elijah, her anchor in the storm. By afternoon, he felt ready to speak, his courage a beacon of hope. Agent Taylor recorded his statement as Rebecca held his hand, her heart swelling with pride. He described the Turners' house in chilling detail, the locked doors, the hidden cameras, the strict rules silencing any talk of real families. They had a special room in the basement, he said, his voice shaking, for kids who talked about their real parents. You had to stay there until you learned to be quiet.
Rebecca foukte back tears à Elia recounted the cold concrete floor, the suffocating darkness, the muffled cry of other children.
Agent Taylor's professional facade cracked, her eyes glistening as she took notes. You're so brave, Elijah, she said when he finished. You're helping us save so many other kids. After she left, Rebecca pulled Elijah close, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry you went through that alone, sweetheart. But you'll never have to be afraid again.
Et touchait leur chic, weeping away à tears.
I know, Mommy. Don't cry, we found each other. The word Mommy hit her like a wave, filling her heart to bursting. The first time he'd called her that, a shift from Judge Williams to the name she dreamed of for 8 years. Marcus returned from a meeting with federal prosecutors, his voice brimming with urgency. They're expanding the investigation nationwide. Similar operations have popped up in California, Texas, Florida. The FBI's setting up a special victims unit just for these cases. Sarah arrived with more files, her face grim. I've been digging through Judge Harris's cases. It's a clear pattern, fast-tracking adoptions for rich clients, terminating parental rights without cause, pushing kids into foster care on flimsy excuses. Always with the same agencies, same doctors, same evaluators. How did no one see this? Rebecca demanded, her voice sharp with disbelief. Some did. Marcus said grimly. 3 social workers tried to blow the whistle, they were fired, their reputations trashed. A court clerk who questioned paperwork. Her house burned down, mysteriously. They guarded their operation with intimidation. Rebecca's phone buzzed again, a text from Jenny flashing across the screen, more nurses stepping forward. 28 cases identified at Riverside alone. Meeting FBI tomorrow. The truth was clawing its way to the surface, unstoppable now, and Rebecca knew they were on the cusp of something monumental, a chance to right a decades-long wrong and reunite families torn apart by greed. Oh, can you feel the pulse of a city on the edge of a seismic truth? The news coverage roared all day, a relentless storm of headlines, with reporters swarming outside Rebecca Williams' house like bees, desperate for a soundbite from the judge who'd uncovered a child trafficking empire. Rebecca kept the curtains drawn tight, shielding Elijah from the chaos, creating a safe cocoon where his world could transform without the glare of cameras. That evening, Agent Lisa Taylor returned, her face grave, another agent at her side. "We need to move you both to a safe house now," she announced, her voice cutting through the quiet. "We've received credible threats. Too many powerful people are being exposed." Rebecca's heart lurched, her instinct to protest rising, but Marcus Chin cut in, his tone urgent.
She's right, Rebecca.
"This isn't just about corrupt doctors and judges anymore. We're talking wealthy families who shelled out hundreds of thousands to buy babies, politicians who pocketed bribes to look the other way, corporate executives laundering the profits. They're all sweating bullets, and they'll do anything to stay in the shadows." Sarah Martinez sprang into action, helping them pack with lightning speed while FBI agents swept the house for surveillance devices.
The discovery of Tribugsant a chilled down Rebecca Espin. The tournée.
Agent Taylor explained, her voice tight with disgust. "They bugged all their kids' belongings before placement, standard procedure for those monsters." Rebecca held Elijah's hand tightly, his small fingers trembling in hers as they were hustled to an unmarked car, the night closing in around them. "How long until we're sure we're safe?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "We've got a secluded location lined up, with round-the-clock security," Taylor assured her. "You can keep coordinating with the task force from there, no one's getting near you." As they drove through the darkened streets, Elijah clutched his precious photograph and the baby pictures Jenny had given him, their edges worn from his constant touch. "Will Miss Jenny be safe?" he asked, his voice small but steady, his concern for her piercing Rebecca's heart. "She's already in protective custody," Taylor replied, her tone softening, "along with other witnesses who've stepped forward to tell the truth." The safe house was a cozy lakeside cabin, tucked away in isolation but equipped with everything they needed. Armed agents patrolled the perimeter, their presence a silent promise of safety, while Rebecca and Elijah settled in, the weight of their journey settling over them. "Think of it as a vacation," Rebecca said, forcing a lightness into her voice for Elijah's sake.
"Just you and me, ident out like super-héros in our secret base."
He managed a small brave smile, his eyes lighting up. "Can we still help the other kids?" "Oh, absolutely," she said, pulling him close.
Det is what super-héros.
Her heart swelled as she held him, her voice fierce with pride. "And you know what makes you the bravest superhero of all? You spoke up. You told the truth, and because of you, other children will find their real families too." The words hung between them, a testament to his courage, and Elijah's smile grew, a flicker of hope in the darkness. Later that night, sleep eluded Rebecca, and she sat on the cabin's porch, the cool lake breeze carrying the weight of her thoughts. Marcus had sent her more case files to review, dozens of stories, each one a mirror of their own heartbreak. Mothers told their babies were dead, children funneled into a corrupt system, lives shattered by greed. Her phone lit up with a secure message from Sarah, the words searing into her soul. "Judge Harris is talking. Says the operation spans 30 years, thousands of cases nationwide, with international ties too." Rebecca's hand shook as she typed back, her heart pounding. "How many children are we talking about?" Sarah's reply was swift, devastating, still counting. "The FBI's building a database to cross-reference hospital records, adoption papers, foster care placements. DNA testing's being offered to any family with suspicious cases." The scope of it was overwhelming, a tidal wave of injustice that threatened to drown her. Rebecca had thought finding Elijah was the end of their story, but it was just the beginning of a much larger fight, a crusade to right a wrong that had festered for decades. A soft sound made her turn, and there was Elijah, standing in the doorway, a blanket draped around his shoulders like a cape. "Another bad dream?" she asked, her voice gentle. He shook his head, his eyes wise beyond his years. "I heard you thinking too loud." Rebecca smiled despite the weight on her heart. "Too loud, huh?" "You're worried about the other kids," he said, coming to sit beside her, his small frame a beacon of resilience. "The ones like me." "Yes," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "There are so many of them, Elijah, so many mothers missing their babies." He was quiet for a moment, then spoke with a certainty that took her breath away. "We have to help them all. Like Miss Jenny helped us." Rebecca pulled him onto her lap, marveling at the strength in his tiny heart. "It won't be easy, sweetheart. Some people don't want the truth to come out. That's why we're superheroes," he reminded her, his voice firm. "Superheroes never give up." Over the next few days, Rebecca threw herself into coordinating with the task force from their secure hideaway, the cabin a fortress of purpose. More arrests rolled in, each one a victory in their fight. Doctors, nurses, agency workers, corrupt officials, all facing the consequences of their crimes. Jenny's evidence was a goldmine, her meticulous records the backbone of the prosecutor's cases, tearing down the walls of secrecy brick by brick. Other whistleblowers emerged, inspired by her courage, their voices joining the chorus demanding justice. The Turners, unmasked as Robert and Mary Sullivan, began cooperating with authorities, trading leniency for details about other fake foster parents, secret safe houses where stolen children were hidden, and offshore accounts brimming with millions in trafficking profits. Sarah worked tirelessly, her days a blur of case reviews, victim identification, and coordinating support services for families scarred by trauma. The FBI's Special Victims Unit launched a hotline for tips, their database humming with activity as it matched missing children to suspicious adoptions, each connection a step toward reunion. Through it all, Elijah was Rebecca's rock, his strength a constant amazement. The way he spoke to investigators, his memory sharp as he identified other children from the Turners' home, his quiet comfort offered to newly discovered victims, it was nothing short of miraculous. One evening, as they sat on the cabin's porch, the sunset painting the sky in fiery hues, Elijah turned to her, his voice soft but sure. "You're getting better at being a mom." Rebecca hugged him close, her heart swelling. "And you're getting better at being a kid," she replied, her voice warm with love. "I saw you playing with Agent Taylor's daughter today, really playing, not just sitting quietly." He nodded, a shy smile breaking through. "I don't have to pretend anymore. Or be scared." "No, you don't." She kissed the top of his head, tears prickling her eyes. "And you know what? Neither do I. For years, I pretended I was okay, that I'd moved on from losing you. But I never did, because moms and kids belong together, no matter what bad people try to do." Rebecca's thoughts drifted to the countless mothers out there, still haunted by the lie that their babies were gone, and the children lost in the system, clinging to memories they'd been told to bury. "We'll find them," she vowed, speaking to all those broken families. "We'll bring them home." The sun dipped below the lake, its brilliance fading into twilight, but mother and son sat together, safe in their temporary sanctuary, while across the country, a movement for justice gained unstoppable momentum. The truth was bursting into the light, and no amount of money or power could hold it back now. Morning sun streamed through the safe house windows, casting golden rays across the wooden floor as Rebecca stared at the envelope in her hands. The preliminary DNA test had already confirmed what her heart knew, but this was the official report, the one that would stand unshakable in court, cementing her legal claim to Elijah. "Want me to open it?" Sarah asked gently, her eyes soft with understanding. She'd driven 3 hours to deliver it personally, unwilling to trust such a precious document to anyone else. Rebecca shook her head, her fingers trembling as she broke the seal, the medical jargon blurring until she found the words that changed everything. 99.9999% probability of maternal relationship confirmed. "It's real," she whispered, her voice breaking with awe. "It's really real." "Of course it's real." Elijah's voice piped up from the doorway, his hair tousled from sleep, his pajamas rumpled but his smile radiant. "We already knew that, Mommy." The simple confidence in his words sent a wave of joy through Rebecca, and she opened her arms, pulling him into a fierce embrace. He fit perfectly against her side as she showed him the paper, her voice trembling with pride. "Look, sweetheart, science agrees with your heart." Agent Taylor arrived soon after, her arms full of fresh case files, her face alight with urgency. "Dr. Wells cracked wide open," she announced, her voice a mix of triumph and disgust. "He's given us everything, names, dates, bank records, 30 years of trafficking operations. But there's something you need to see." She pulled out a hospital security photo, dated the night of Elijah's birth, a nurse carrying a newborn down a dim corridor. This was Jennifer Kirkland, risking everything to get photographic proof. She hacked into the security system that night. More photos followed, each one a dagger to Rebecca's heart. Dr. Wells with a well-dressed couple, money changing hands, papers signed. Then the most damning image of all, Elijah, alive and healthy, being handed to the Richardsons while Rebecca lay unconscious in recovery. They told me he was stillborn. Rebecca's voice shook with rage, her fists clenching. They didn't even let me see him. They had it down to a science, Taylor said grimly. They knew exactly how long the anesthesia would keep mothers out. By the time you woke, Elijah was gone. Sarah reviewed her notes, her voice steady but heavy. The Richardsons paid $350,000 that night, split between Dr. Wells, the hospital administrator, and New Beginnings Family Services. What happened to the Richardsons? Rebecca demanded, her voice fierce. Arrested this morning in Connecticut. Taylor said, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. They were living under fake names, but facial recognition caught them trying to flee to Switzerland. Elijah studied the photos, his small finger pointing to Mrs. Richardson. I remember her, he said suddenly. She cried a lot, said I wasn't the baby she paid for. Rebecca pulled him closer, fighting back tears of fury. You were perfect, sweetheart. They were the ones who were wrong, utterly wrong. Marcus arrived next, his face alight with news from the expanding investigation. We've cracked the hospital records pattern, he said, his voice urgent. They targeted mothers with specific traits, educated, healthy, strong genetics, then matched them with wealthy couples wanting similar babies. Designer babies. Sarah spat, her voice dripping with disdain. They treated children like luxury goods. The price depended on the mother's background, Marcus continued. They charged more for babies from mothers with advanced degrees, high IQs, or special talents. Rebecca, they jacked up Elijah's price because you were a judge. Rebecca felt sick, her stomach churning at the thought. How many other judges were involved? 7 so far. Taylor said, pulling up files on her laptop. All tied to New Beginnings and similar agencies, fast-tracking adoptions, terminating parental rights, blocking investigations. Judge Harris gave us names of other corrupt officials, she added, prosecutors burying evidence, cops turning a blind eye, politicians killing oversight laws. The web's sprawling. Elijah listened, his face serious. Is that why no one helped us before? Because the bad people were everywhere. Some tried, sweetheart. Rebecca said, her voice fierce with gratitude. Like Miss Jenny. But yes, the bad people had too much power, until now. Jenny herself arrived that afternoon, escorted by FBI agents from her own safe location, her face lighting up when she saw Elijah. There's my brave boy, she exclaimed, her voice warm with pride. I hear you've been helping the investigators. Elijah ran to hug her, his small arms wrapping around her tightly. I told them about the Turner's basement and the other kids. Thanks to Elijah's testimony, we've identified 6 more children from their home. Taylor said, her voice full of admiration. 3 are already matched with their birth families through DNA testing. Jenny settled in, pulling more documents from her ever-present briefcase, her hands steady now. I've been working with the FBI's forensic accountants, she said. We've traced payments through offshore accounts, shell companies, hidden assets. The money trail goes back decades. Marcus whistled, his eyes wide. Billions of dollars, private islands, luxury estates, political donations, all funded by stolen children. Rebecca's judicial mind was already building cases, her voice sharp with purpose. We'll need special prosecutors, dedicated court resources. These cases will take years to unravel. The FBI's on it. Taylor confirmed. We're launching Operation Lost Children, a permanent task force with agents, accountants, victim support, everything to see this through. Sarah's phone buzzed with updates, her voice rising with excitement. Families are coming forward every day. The DNA database is lighting up with matches. We've already reunited 15 mothers with children they were told had died. The room pulsed with hope, the promise of justice a beacon in the darkness, and Rebecca knew they were fighting not just for Elijah, but for every family torn apart by this monstrous conspiracy. Oh, can you feel the weight of a child's question piercing through the chaos? Elijah's small voice rang out, soft but unyielding, as he looked up with wide, searching eyes. What happens to the bad parents? The ones who bought babies? The room stilled, the complexity of his question hanging like a storm cloud. Agent Lisa Taylor paused, her voice careful yet steady. It's tricky, Elijah. Each case is different. Some knew they were buying stolen babies. They'll face serious criminal charges. Others might have thought they were doing legal adoptions. We're investigating every single one to get it right. Rebecca tightened her arm around her son, her heart swelling with protective love. The most important thing, sweetheart, is keeping kids safe and helping families heal, she said, her voice fierce with conviction. That's what we're fighting for. Jenny Kirkland reached into her briefcase, her hand steady now, pulling out one final devastating piece of evidence, a recorded conversation between Dr. Wells and the hospital administrator from the night Elijah was born. The casual way they discussed pricing, the logistics of stealing a child, their cruel jokes about grieving mothers, it set Rebecca's blood ablaze with rage. I held on to this recording for 8 years, Jenny declared, her voice trembling with the weight of her mission. Waiting for the right moment, the right person to trust. When I saw Elijah recognize you in that courtroom, I knew this was it. The raw truth in her words hit like a thunderbolt, fueling their resolve to tear down the corrupt empire that had stolen so many lives. The day dragged on, a marathon of reviewing evidence, uncovering connections that wove a chilling tapestry of deceit. Rebecca watched Elijah with Jenny, her heart warming as she noticed how freely he smiled now, how the haunted look in his eyes was fading, replaced by a spark of hope. But oh, her thoughts kept drifting to the other children out there, still carrying that same haunted gaze, still separated from the families who loved them. That evening, after the others had left, Rebecca sat with Elijah on the safe house porch, the lake reflecting a sunset that painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, a serene backdrop to their quiet moment. The DNA test says what we already knew, she told him, her voice soft with awe. I'm your mother, legally and forever. Elijah nodded, his face calm, unsurprised. I knew it from your heart, remember? And your song. Our song, she corrected, humming a few bars of their lullaby, the melody a bridge across their lost years. This test means no one can ever take you away again, you're mine, officially forever. What about the other kids? He asked, his voice tinged with concern. Will they get tests too? Rebecca's heart swelled at his empathy. Yes, sweetheart. The FBI's making sure every family gets DNA testing. And thanks to you and Miss Jenny, they know exactly what to look for. All those fake papers, those missing files, they can't hide the truth anymore. Elijah fell quiet, his brow furrowed in thought. Some kids might be scared, he said finally, his voice soft but wise. Like I was at first, scared to remember, scared to tell. Rebecca marveled at his insight, her eyes shining with pride. That's why your story matters so much. You're showing them it's safe to remember, safe to speak up. You're helping them find their bravery. His sleepy smile was real, lighting up the twilight. Like a superhero? Exactly like a superhero, she exclaimed, pulling him closer as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the lake. Want to know a secret? She whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You made me brave too. I was so scared to hope, to believe you could really be my son. But your courage, it gave me courage. Elijah yawned, snuggling against her, his warmth a balm to her soul. That's what families do, right? Help each other be brave. Right. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes at his simple, profound wisdom. And now we get to help other families find their courage too. As Elijah drifted off to sleep in her arms, Rebecca's thoughts turned to the days ahead. There would be trials, testimony, gut-wrenching questions to answer. The wealthy and powerful would claw back, desperate to protect their secrets and the children they'd stolen. But they had truth on their side now, and evidence that couldn't be buried, Jenny's meticulous documentation, the FBI's relentless investigation, DNA science that could stitch families back together across decades. It was all coming together, a tidal wave to expose a corrupt system and heal countless broken hearts. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from Agent Taylor lighting up the screen. 3 more matches confirmed tonight. Mothers in Boston, Seattle, and Miami. Their children were taken just like Elijah. DNA confirms. Reunions being arranged. Rebecca smiled through her tears, her heart soaring as she imagined other mothers receiving the news she'd been blessed with, the miraculous truth that their babies hadn't died, that hope and healing were within reach. She thought of all the children like Elijah, carrying memories they'd been told to forget, finally being heard, believed, and loved. The night deepened around them, the stars emerging one by one, silent witnesses to a story of loss and redemption that stretched far beyond their little cabin. Rebecca held her sleeping son, their matching heartbeats a poignant reminder of all they'd lost and found again. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more families rediscovered, more truth unveiled, but tonight? Oh, tonight they were together, safe in the certainty that their long, painful separation was over. Somewhere in the growing darkness, other mothers lay awake, haunted by the babies they'd been told were gone, the children they'd never held. Soon, they'd know the truth. Soon, they'd hold their children again, all because of a brave little boy who refused to forget and a mother whose love never wavered. In safe houses across the country, other children slept soundly tonight, protected as justice slowly turned its wheels. Other mothers kept vigil, clinging to a hope that had seemed impossible just days ago. Rebecca gazed down at Elijah's peaceful face, seeing in it a world of possibility, healing, redemption, a future reclaimed. They'd found each other against impossible odds, exposed a criminal enterprise that had seemed untouchable, and sparked hope for countless families torn apart by greed and corruption. The truth was unstoppable now, a beacon cutting through the darkness. Justice was coming, slow but as certain as the dawn, and with it, healing, reunion, and the rebuilding of families shattered by decades of lies. The lake waters lapped gently at the shore, a soft lullaby for a mother and child finally reunited, their story a key unlocking doors for others, shining light into the darkest corners where truth had been buried. 2 months later, Rebecca stood in her newly renovated home office, her heart full as she watched Elijah through the window, playing in the backyard with a girl named Sophie, another child trafficked through new beginnings. Their laughter was a melody, a testament to their instant bond forged in family support group meetings. They're so good for each other. Sophie's mother, Catherine, said softly from the doorway, her voice warm with gratitude. They understand things other kids just can't. Rebecca nodded, her eyes tracing Elijah's carefree movements, so different from the cautious boy she'd met in the courtroom. He's teaching me too, she admitted, her voice tinged with wonder. About healing, about starting over, about what it means to truly live again. The past months had been a whirlwind, intense and transformative. After 6 weeks in the safe house, they'd returned home to a life forever changed. Rebecca had taken a leave of absence from the bench, pouring her energy into Elijah and the expanding investigation that was rewriting countless lives. Their house had been redesigned with Elijah's input, warm colors, soft lighting, cozy spaces that felt like a hug, a sanctuary for a boy who'd known too little safety. Dr. Matthews says their play therapy is working wonders, Catherine remarked, her eyes following their children as they chased each other through the grass. Sophie's nightmares are fading. Elijah's too, Rebecca said, her voice soft with relief. Though he still checks sometimes, especially at night, to make sure I'm real. The doorbell chimed, heralding Sarah Martinez's arrival, her arms laden with files but her face glowing with good news. 3 more matches confirmed through the DNA database, she announced, her voice brimming with excitement. All kids taken from mothers at Riverside Memorial, 2 in foster care, 1 with an adoptive family who swears they didn't know. Rebecca led them to the kitchen, where Jenny Kirkland was already waiting, her silver hair catching the light as she sipped coffee. The former nurse had moved nearby, becoming an honorary grandmother to the recovered children, her heart as fierce as ever in their fight for justice. How are the prosecutions going? Catherine asked, accepting a steaming mug. Dr. Wells took a plea deal. Sarah reported, her tone a mix of triumph and disdain. 25 years in federal prison for testifying against the hospital board and agency directors. Judge Harris is up for sentencing next week, facing 15 to 20 years. Jenny pulled out her latest notes, her voice steady. The FBI's traced over $3 billion through the trafficking network. Properties seized, accounts frozen, they're funneling the money into a victim compensation fund. Rebecca's thoughts turned to the Richardsons, languishing in jail, their offer to testify ejected by prosecutors who had airtight evidence, including Elijah's heartbreaking account of their abuse. How many children have been found so far? Catherine asked, her voice soft with hope. 212 confirmed cases. Sarah said, her eyes wide. But that's just from 3 hospitals. The FBI thinks there could be thousands nationwide. Through the window, Elijah was showing Sophie his new treehouse, a gift from Rebecca that he insisted on sharing, his therapist noting how creating and sharing safe spaces was a vital step in his healing. The support groups are making a difference, Jenny observed, her voice warm with pride. The kids' groups, the mothers' meetings, there's power in being with others who get it. Rebecca nodded, her heart full. The weekly gatherings had become a lifeline, a place where mothers shared stories of loss and reunion, where children found friends who understood their unique scars. They celebrated every milestone, first words spoken, first nights without nightmares, first genuine smiles. Elijah's thriving at his new school, Rebecca shared, her voice glowing with pride. His private school, specializing in trauma-informed education, was a perfect fit. His teachers say he's joining class discussions, making friends. Sophie too. Catherine smiled, her eyes misty. Yesterday, she raised her hand to answer a question, her first time since we found each other. Children's laughter drifted through the open window, a sound that filled Rebecca's soul. Elijah was teaching Sophie their special song, the lullaby that had guided him back to his mother. Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes as Sophie's clear voice joined his, a harmony of healing. He's helping her heal, Catherine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Just like he helped crack this whole case wide open. Sarah nodded, her voice steady but warm. The FBI says Elijah's testimony was the cornerstone. His memory for details, his ability to identify key players, it gave them the foundation to build their cases. He's still my little superhero, Rebecca said, her voice bursting with pride. But now he gets to be a kid too. Elijah's transformation over the past months was nothing short of miraculous. The silent, withdrawn boy from the courtroom had blossomed into a caring, creative child, using his pain to lift others up. He still had tough moments, triggers that summoned dark memories, flashes of fear or anger, but he was learning to cope, buoyed by his mother's unwavering love and the support of a community that understood. The fight was far from over, but in that kitchen, surrounded by allies and the sound of children's laughter, Rebecca felt a surge of hope. Together, they were rewriting a story of loss into one of redemption, one brave step at a time. Oh, can you imagine the bittersweet ache of watching a child heal from unimaginable pain? Sarah Martinez's face darkened, her voice heavy with the weight of truth as she spoke. The hardest cases are the older kids, teenagers who grew up never knowing they were stolen. Some just can't bear to believe their adoptive families were part of this nightmare. Jenny Kirkland's eyes softened, her tone gentle but firm as she leaned forward. We can't force healing on anyone, she reminded them, her voice a soothing balm. Each child, each family has to carve their own path through this mess. All we can do is offer support, resources, and love to light the way. Rebecca's heart drifted to the family therapy sessions she and Elijah attended twice a week, their therapist a guiding star helping them navigate the choppy waters of their unique bond. A mother and son reunited after 8 long years, both scarred by different shades of trauma. They were learning to talk, to trust, to weave new memories while cradling the pain of their separation, each session a step toward healing. Rebecca's voice dropped, a quiet confession laced with worry. The prosecution wants Elijah to testify at the Richardson's trial. I'm terrified it's too much for him. Catherine's eyes met hers, full of empathy. What does he want? He says he wants to make sure they can't hurt any more kids. Rebecca replied, her heart swelling with pride but aching with fear. But I see the toll it takes, nightmares that wake him screaming, anxiety attacks that steal his breath. I can't let him sacrifice his healing for this case. Sarah reached out, her hand a gentle anchor on Rebecca's arm. The prosecutors have his recorded testimony from the safe house, she said softly. They can use that instead of dragging him through a trial. He's done enough. The back door burst open, and Elijah bounded in, Sophie right on his heels, their cheeks flushed with the joy of play, their laughter a melody that filled the room. Mom, can we have cookies? Elijah asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. I promised to show Sophie how to dunk them just right. Rebecca's heart melted at this simple childish plea, a moment of normalcy in a world turned upside down. Of course, sweetheart, she said, her smile wide. Why don't you both help me get them ready? As the children scampered to the sink, washing their hands with giggles and splashes, Rebecca marveled at their resilience. How could they have survived such unimaginable trauma, yet here they were, bubbling with joy over cookies. Remember. Elijah instructed Sophie, his tone serious but playful, 3 seconds in the milk, any longer, and it gets way too soggy. Sophie nodded, her brow furrowed with adorable intensity as she dipped her cookie. Like this. Perfect. Elijah beamed, his grin lighting up the kitchen. Mom, Sophie's a natural cookie dunker. The adults exchanged glances, their eyes misty with emotion, each one recognizing the profound beauty of this moment. These children who'd endured so much were reclaiming their right to be kids, one cookie at a time. Their laughter was a defiance of the pain they'd known, a testament to the strength of their spirits. Later that evening, after Sophie and Catherine had headed home, Rebecca sat with Elijah on their favorite porch swing, the setting sun painting the sky in tranquil hues of lavender and gold, a peaceful canvas for their quiet ritual. They shared their daily grateful moments, a practice their therapist had suggested to nurture their bond. I'm grateful Sophie didn't get sad today, Elijah said thoughtfully, his voice soft but earnest. Sometimes when we play, she gets all quiet and scared, but today she was just happy. Rebecca hugged him close, her heart swelling with love for this boy who saw so much, cared so deeply. That's because you're such an incredible friend to her, Elijah, she said, her voice warm with pride. You help her feel safe, just like you've helped so many others by being so brave. The moment wrapped around them like a warm blanket, a reminder of the healing power of love and friendship, a beacon of hope in a world still mending from the scars of a sinister conspiracy. Oh, my heart aches and soars reading this story of Rebecca and Elijah. Their reunion is a breathtaking testament to the unbreakable bond between a mother and child, a love so fierce it shattered a decades-long conspiracy. Elijah's courage, clinging to a worn photograph and a lullaby's memory, is nothing short of heroic. How could such a young soul carry so much hope through years of pain? Rebecca's transformation from a grieving judge to a warrior mother moves me to tears. Her determination to protect Elijah and others stolen by greed is a blazing light in a dark world. The resilience of these children, giggling over cookies despite unimaginable trauma, fills me with awe and hope. Yet, the story's weight lingers. How many families still ache for reunion, haunted by lies? Jenny's quiet heroism, risking everything to preserve the truth, and the collective fight for justice stir my soul. This isn't just a story, it's a call to action, a reminder that love and truth can topple even the most entrenched evil. I'm inspired, heartbroken, and hopeful, believing that every child like Elijah deserves to find their way home.